It's not about the injury. It's not about the injury. It's about the recovery. It's about the recovery.
Hi folks, this is Paul Padda coming to you live from Red Chimp Studios in beautiful sunny Las Vegas, Nevada. Today we've got another great podcast episode. I'm really honored to have a wonderful guest and also a friend, Michael Humphreys, someone I've known for many, many years. Michael, you and I, we go back quite a number of years.
No, quite a ways.
All the way back to the Virgin
Decades.
Islands when I was a mere law clerk and
Absolutely.
you were a federal prosecutor. And then by complete chance, you ended up in Washington, D.C., and that's where I was. And now you have joined Paul Padda Law and the Vegas lawyers doing federal criminal work. Really honored to have you on today's show.
Right, thank you very much, and you're absolutely right. We started off in the Virgin Islands. We moved not together, but more or less one following the other to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C., where we met, we really hung out, we worked in the same section, the same division for a long time. I had been doing criminal and civil work in the VI or in the Virgin Islands.
Yeah.
And I did both criminal and civil work in DC. And then you decided to depart for the sunny climes of Las Vegas, and we're back here together again. And I followed you out here,
I think it's
so
karma.
I'm not a stalker. I'm not a stalker. So.
Well, I've never had a stalker, so I'm very honored if I actually have one. But, so listen, this is the part we like to talk a little bit about our guest's background, because I think a lot of our viewers are probably wondering, okay, there's always a human interest aspect to every guest, and people have a story behind the story. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What brought you to Vegas? How long have you been in Vegas? What do you love most about Las Vegas?
Well, I've been in Vegas now for going to close on 10 years.
Wow.
I came here in 2009. It'll be my 10th year anniversary.
Time goes like this in Las Vegas, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
Yeah.
It has gone very quickly. It's passed by very fast. As I said, I came here from Washington, D.C., and you are responsible, if not partially, if not fully, partially responsible. You told me about a job opportunity out here. I said, why not? I came out, did a couple of interviews, and next thing you know, one thing leads to another, and I'm here. And
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed it. I've developed not only a professional life here, but a personal life here. I met the woman who is now my wife here.
Beautiful Ronnie, yes.
Yeah, beautiful Ronnie. And so I think I'm here for the duration. This is a great place to live. This is a great place to retire. And I have to say,
I know you're a golfer. Great place to play golf too, right?
And I'm a golfer. And I'm in somewhat of a retirement mode, but you came and said, hey, Michael, retirement is boring. You were right.
Yes.
And so I'm here with you, just sort of learning the ropes, picking and choosing amongst the many options that I have in terms of criminal, civil, and appellate. We just talked about appellate a few minutes ago and the opportunities and the options that both of us could have.
Well, I know you bring so much to the table with your criminal background. Tony Abitangelo, who's sort of the spokesman and our face for the Vegas lawyers, and you're now part of that team,
right.
Handling a lot of the cases on the federal side. With your tremendous background, it's been a real asset, and we're going to get into that.
Right.
Why don't you tell our viewers, first of all, what is the U.S. Attorney's Office, and what does that office do?
Well, the U.S. Attorney's Office is the federal prosecution body for the federal government. And I should say that there are both a state prosecution's office and a federal prosecution's office, and I've had the opportunity to work for both.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in the Virgin Islands, I worked at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I was also a local prosecutor.
Yeah.
Well, how did that work?
Right.
Well, it worked because at the time, by statute, the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Virgin Islands had the right, or had the jurisdiction, I guess is the better word, to enforce the local criminal code.
Right.
And so
kind of like D.C. It's like
yeah,
that.
just like D.C. The same thing happened in D.C. when I left there, but it was really interesting for me because when I went to the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Virgin Islands and then migrated to D.C., but starting out in the Virgin Islands, I was a young lawyer, much younger than I am now. And
well, you're still in your 40s, right?
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, 40 plus. But the thing is, it was really interesting because I was a young Turk. They even called me the Young Turk because I was an eager beaver. I wanted to get as many cases as I could. But as you all know, when you go to the U.S. Attorney's Office, oftentimes because of the prestige of that office, they only take the big cases.
Right.
And they only take the complex cases, the
Yeah.
complicated cases. But in the Virgin Islands, because they enforced the local criminal code there,
did it
you
all,
could do burglaries or assaults, sexual assaults, B&Es, all that sort of thing. And I was constantly saying, put me in the game, coach, put me in the game, because I wanted the trial work.
Right.
I was interested in the trial work. So I had that opportunity to do both prestigious federal cases, if you will, and at the same time do a little breaking and entering, an assault, a domestic case.
Yeah.
So it was a smorgasbord, I guess, of experience that I got from that, and I was glad to have it. And I don't, you know, usually when lawyers come out of law school, they have to choose one or the other. They go to a big corporate law firm where they hardly ever get into court, or you know, they go to a prosecutor's office where, you know, it may be not the most sophisticated cases. I think I had a sampling of both. So I'm really glad for that experience. And when I went to D.C., it was basically the same thing. I started out in the civil division there.
Right, I remember that.
And then I went to the criminal division where, again, I was doing sort of misdemeanor work, and then I advanced to general felonies. I saw that just to say that I think I have a pretty good and broad general background of the law.
So then when you, so Virgin Islands, then Washington, D.C., where you're doing like high profile civil work, defending constitutional rights or constitutional cases.
Right.
Then you switch to the criminal side, and now you come out to Las Vegas and you're doing, I know, my understanding was a lot of asset forfeiture work, right?
Right. I came out to Las Vegas to do a little asset forfeiture work. They specifically hired me to do that.
So what does that mean? For most people, they hear that and they're like, asset forfeiture, what the heck does that even mean?
Well,
first of all, you know what? Let's back up for a second. What is the difference between civil and criminal law? Why don't you explain that to our viewers?
Well, that one's a real simple one. Criminal law can only be enforced by the sovereign, by the government. So I can't.
Uncle Sam or the local government coming after you.
I cannot sue you and put you in prison. Only the government can sue you and put you in prison.
For that,
But I can sue you, or you can sue me and take my money.
Right.
So for example, if there's an accident and I run into you and you sustain injuries, then you can go to court and you can say, he damaged me. Michael Humphreys damaged me. My car is wrecked. I had to go to the hospital. I lost work income, so on and so forth, and I would like to be compensated by that. There are many, many, many more civil cases overall in both the federal system and in the in the state system than there are criminal cases. And so that speaks to the fact that only the government can bring criminal cases. Now, I hasten to add that the government can also be involved in civil work, and I was involved in civil work. And civil work is, again, just think of it this way. Civil work is all about the money. I'm suing you, you're suing me. The only outcome, the only remedy is money. In the criminal case, of course, the remedy or the sanction is probably a better way to put it, is jail or fines, restitution, that sort of thing. So that's the basic difference between civil and criminal. Do you have a pen on you or something?
I don't, unfortunately.
Let's assume. Let's go to the next question.
Right, I've handed you the magical pen.
Okay. Let's take this globe. We're going to talk a little bit about asset forfeiture. Let's say this globe is yours. You paid for it. It belongs to you. Under our system of government, where we live in a capitalist system, once you own something, it's yours. I could never take it.
I have
Even-
property rights.
Yeah, you have property rights, and those property rights were extended to you by the Constitution. The Fifth Amendment says that the government can't take your property without just compensation.
But I
Which
know
is-
that happens all the time, so
And you-
how's that going down?
And now, so you're setting this, you're teeing this up for me, aren't you? So this is your globe,
Yeah.
and let's assume that this globe, you bought it after you were involved in a drug transaction. So this globe is the proceeds of crime. Or let's say this globe is a car, and you used the car to engage in a drug transaction. You know what I can do? I can take this globe away from you, and you say, where's my money? And I say to you, as the government, you don't get to have money because I am forfeiting your asset. And you say, what about the Constitution?
That's
What
right.
about the Fifth Amendment?
Yeah.
And I say to you, look to Congress. Congress has carved out an exception in asset forfeiture that means that the government gets to take your stuff without just compensation because you committed a crime in order to acquire that asset. I'm going to give you your globe back now that the example is over. But that's basically what asset forfeiture is. The government and
Then I got to go hire an attorney like you to get my stuff back.
and then you have to come and get an attorney like me to get your things back. And there are defenses
Yeah.
to asset forfeiture. And I will tell you that from a political perspective, the government used to be able to cut a very wide swath, Paul, with regard to forfeiture.
So, you
there
know,
was-
this brings up an interesting point, and I know one of our viewers has a great question. You know, the cops pull someone over on the highway in Nevada. It's at 3 o'clock in the morning. Oh, sir, step out of the car. We think we suspect that you're driving drunk. Okay, the guy gets out of the car. Now they're looking in there, and all of a sudden, and the guy's not drunk. They spot, let's say, $50,000, and they take that money. Does the government get to keep that money?
Well, that leads to a. It depends, I guess. That's always the legal
That's a very
answer.
lawyer answer.
That's a very lawyerly answer. If, in fact, the cop had no right to stop the car in the first place, it very well may be that you could get your money back. There's also the issue of whether the cop, where the asset was. You said it was $50,000, right?
Yeah, just say it's 50 or 100. I mean, there was a case here in Nevada where a gentleman was pulled over, and subsequently it was shown that the reason the cop pulled him over was just not warranted or justified. There was no probable cause, as lawyers like to say, or judges like to use that terminology.
Pretextual.
Pretextual.
That's what we like to say.
But there was a suspicion that he had a lot of money. Now, they never could show that there was drug trafficking proceeds or anything, but the government kept the money. And that's become, you know, in Texas, there's been a lot of investigative reports of small towns that will pull drivers over, and especially a lot of minority drivers, and keep their things just because they suspected that they, you know, come up with some trumped up reason to pull someone over. And then all of a sudden now these municipalities making millions of dollars collecting items that they're seizing from people who may or may not have been pulled over properly.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the political dynamics of forfeiture, because the pendulum has been swinging in one direction for a number of years, in fact, for decades, where the government was just seizing right and left.
Right.
And within the last 5 to 10 years, I would say, both Congress and the courts have taken notice of that, and they've drawn back on forfeiture. So this guy, let's go back to your example of the guy who got stopped with the $50,000. Of course, every lawyer is going to say, like I've said, it depends. Every case is fact specific. But the way in which you've presented the facts now, and I know you're painting with a very broad brush, Paul. No, the government doesn't get to keep that money. There has to be a nexus, some sort of nexus. There has to be some sort of cause and effect, just like there is in everything to life. You know, I sort of said very broadly the government just gets to take your asset. But there has to be, as there is in every case, a factual basis. And therefore there can be a trial to make that determination as to whether there are sufficient facts to establish a preponderance of the evidence in a civil case and a beyond a reasonable doubt in a criminal case. Now,
Okay.
I don't want to get in too much into the weeds. Maybe we can do that on another session about
Yeah.
the distinction between the standards and burdens of proof between criminal cases and civil cases. But to answer your question, again, a long-winded lawyerly way of saying, no, the government just doesn't get to keep it. I mean, they don't hold the role of a king. You know, O King George in England,
Right.
were the reason why
why
everybody
we had a
came.
revolution, Dennis,
That's,
yeah.
that's why we all came over
Yeah.
here. The king got to do that.
Right.
Okay, but fortunately, in this country, there are rules that the government has to honor and observe in order to take your assets. And there has been a real big rollback of people who have had their assets taken by the government, where the courts, especially in Nevada,
Yeah.
and Congress as well, are looking at forfeiture with a much more critical eye.
That is really interesting. You know what? We're going to continue the conversation. This is some really fascinating stuff. We're going to turn to a segment that we call Paul Padda for the People, where I throw
Okay.
out some tips
I'll sit
to
here
help our
and-
folks out there navigate the complexities of our world, and hopefully some legal tips that will help you out. Paul Padda for the People. Hi folks, Paul Padda of Paul Padda Law. Paul Padda for the People, bringing you another great tip. You know, one of the areas of law that we represent a lot of clients in is medical malpractice cases. There's a lot of personal injury attorneys in town, but very few PI lawyers handle medical malpractice cases. These are very complicated cases. Obviously, because of the nature of the lawsuit, you're suing a doctor or a hospital. It requires a certain amount of knowledge regarding medicine, obviously, and standards of care, et cetera. But at Paul Padda Law, we work with the best experts. We work with some of the best medical consultants to put together really strong cases on medical malpractice. We're very selective about the type of cases we take. We get a lot of calls to our office about it, but we can't take every case. One of the most important things to remember about medical malpractice is that if you've been victimized by a malpractice event in a hospital or by a doctor, you have 1 year from the date of the injury or the date you should have known about the injury to file a lawsuit. The 1 year statute of limitation trips up a lot of people who come in 2-3 years after the fact, but at that point it's too late. Just always remember, medical malpractice, there's a 1 year statute of limitations in Nevada, subject to, of course, a few exceptions, but for the most part, it's a 1 year rule and it's very strictly enforced by the courts. Paul Padda with another great pointer for you. All right, welcome back to Paul Padda Podcast. We are here with Michael Humphreys, a phenomenal lawyer and a member of the Vegas lawyers team, battling it out in federal court on behalf of clients facing federal criminal charges. Michael, you've had a very distinguished career. We've had a nice conversation. You were educating us about asset forfeiture. I want to just turn to, I think, a topic, you know, a lot of people most people don't really know what the feds do. And I use that word, the feds, that's how people think of the federal government. But really, there's an alphabet soup of agencies like the FBI, Secret Service, IRS, Homeland Security. You know, and each of those agencies, I guess, could prosecute people under various types of crimes, right, that arise under the federal criminal code.
Right.
But in a nutshell, what is really the difference between these agencies, and do they all work together? Are they separate? How does that work?
Well, each case starts when you watch your television program about these lawyer shows. You always see the lawyers in the courtroom and they're arguing the case and they're up before the judge. But rest assured, in reality, those cases start sometimes months and years beforehand. And the prosecutor may not even know about the case for the first year that it's being investigated. And investigated is the pivotal word. Investigations are started by investigators. Now that may seem obvious, but in the federal government there are several criminal and or civil investigative agencies, and an investigator could be investigating both a criminal aspect of the case and a civil aspect of the case at the same time. Let's just stick for now for the criminal case. The way that criminal cases start are the way that a lot of things start. People will see something, they'll say something, they think that a crime is underway, they will call the FBI. Let's talk about your typical fraud case. A typical fraud case, the victim himself or herself
That's
is the
a great
one
point, yeah.
who's been aggrieved, so she will call
Yeah.
or he will call the FBI.
Okay.
If it's a drug case, the reason most of those start, once again, are people on the street. A tip will come in, someone who doesn't like something that's going on in their neighborhood, so they will call the DEA, the FBI.
Okay.
Um,
Or even the
there-
local
yes,
cops, right?
There are a smorgasbord of criminal investigative agencies. I'm gonna see if I can remember some of them. DEA, FBI, and I believe that the FBI is probably, since its inception, considered first among equals. They all have arrest powers. They have
Oh
all.
boy, you're going to get in trouble with the DEA
Yeah.
and ATF guys. IRS. Don't mess with the IRS.
The IRS, but the IRS function mostly on tax offenses. But I'm talking about the thing that people see on TV
Right.
where people are drawing their guns or they're
Yeah.
chasing the bad guys in cars, car chases and that sort of thing. That's basically the FBI, DEA, Homeland Security also has a criminal investigatory component in its unit. Who am I forgetting? It's like you say, you don't want to overlook anybody, but let's just give it a round number, approximately 6 major investigative agencies. I know that there are investigative agencies that are attached to various military branches. So there are a lot of them, but the principal ones are, I hate to put it this way, but the ones that you kind of see on TV, the DEAs, the FBIs, that sort of thing.
All right,
And they start-
let's give folks out there who are watching the show, listening to these two lawyers talk, let's give them some practical tips. Because I've always been amazed and kind of surprised at how many people who have come in to see me on a criminal issue, they start by telling me, well, the police showed up or the FBI showed up and I was talking to them. And I said, well, time out there. Don't you ever watch TV? Did you not think like I should say I want to get a lawyer or what? I want to talk to my lawyer first. People think that they're under an obligation to necessarily talk to the FBI or the cops. Is that true? And if someone were to get a knock on the door from law enforcement, how should they handle that?
Well, if someone knocks on your door and the police say they want to talk to you, and they're at your door, that's different from stopping you on the street. On the street, if they stop you in a vehicle,
Right.
you do have somewhat of an
you can't speed
obligation.
off, obviously.
Yeah, you just can't. You can't just.
That wouldn't be a good plan,
You can't
no.
that's not a good idea to drive away.
Yeah, no.
But unless they have a warrant, they don't. You don't have an obligation for them to talk to anyone who shows up on your door, whether it's the police or the priest or your next door neighbor. You are the king of your castle.
Yeah.
So you don't have to say anything to them. Now that said, there is people are intimidated often when the police show up in a uniform.
Sure.
And so they feel that maybe I can talk my way out of this, even if they haven't done anything.
Right.
They feel the need to talk to the police. That's not necessarily the case. And it would certainly be my recommendation to the police, unless there is a compelling reason for you to talk to them, you don't have to say anything to the police who just show up at your doorstep.
Yeah. Get a lawyer and then talk.
Get a lawyer and then talk.
Yeah.
That's always the best advice.
Right.
And this is, again, I think that's true of everyone, but even whether you feel that you've done something wrong or if you know you haven't, always get a lawyer. It's
Yeah.
always best to get a lawyer. And let's assume that you maybe feel that you have done something wrong. Still don't say anything.
Yeah.
You don't have an obligation to help them do anything. As a federal prosecutor, and you probably know this, Paul, the strongest evidence that a prosecutor could have is what is called an admission,
That's
a
right.
confession.
Yeah.
So if the police show up at your door and you either indirectly or directly say, I did it, you've made it an easy day for the prosecutor in court.
I guess
Because
OJ was smart. He said, if I did it, this is how.
I did it, this is how I would do it.
Yeah.
So to summarize, No, there's nothing that you are compelled to say. There's nothing in the Constitution. There's nothing in any criminal statute or congressional statute that says that you are compelled to talk to the police. Now, I must add...
And I would also say be respectful to the police,
Absolutely.
to the FBI. Kindness always goes a long way.
Right.
Don't be hostile. Just say, listen, sir, I respect your authority, but I'm going to get an attorney and then I'll reach out to you.
Right. And I would also add, if you do decide to talk to the police, make sure you're honest and make sure you don't lie. That's why it's important that you get a lawyer first, because only a lawyer can objectively make a determination about what's important, what's not important, what maybe it's okay for you to tell the police, and which you or that which you shouldn't say anything about.
That's
only a
interesting.
lawyer can make that sort of objective assessment and determination. It's always best, and I know I sound like I'm doing a plug here, but any lawyer, I would assume, even though I've never met any of the 9 justices, they would all say the same thing.
Yeah, that's right.
You
that's
know?
True. Yeah.
That they would all say.
That's how our system works. You have a right. The Constitution gives you that right to remain silent.
If you have a confrontation with an agent from the government, it's best that you invoke your rights.
Yeah.
And they are rights. They're not privileges.
That's right.
They are rights. And so you should invoke your rights and let the lawyer to make a dispassionate determination about what it is that you would like to reveal to the government.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, I want to, now we don't have a lot of time left, but I want to just turn to a topic that's really timely, and it's really a source of a lot of debate. There seems to be a sea change in the attitude of the general public and even the political elected officials in terms of how they look at the criminal justice system. I'm reading a book right now called 3 Felonies a Day, which is an interesting book, and the premise of the book is that there's too many criminal laws out there. The average person probably commits 3 felonies a day without even knowing it. Now, I know that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but do you agree, even though you're a former federal are there too many laws in the books?
Well, I think...
Are there too many criminal laws in the books?
I think that there has been a movement, a political movement, especially in the last couple of years, and it doesn't matter which side of the aisle that you are on politically, to the right or to the left, that people just want to be left alone, that people want to be able to manage their own affairs. Now, that doesn't mean that you should be able to go up and beat up your neighbor whenever you want to, but I think that there is a trend, as you say, that there are a lot of laws on the books, administrative laws, that sort of thing, maybe even criminal laws, okay? And so, yeah, I would agree with you. I haven't read the book, I have to confess. I will make sure that I download it this evening. But yeah, you're probably right about that.
Well, and then a lot of I see this on the Democratic side. There's a debate. You have Kamala Harris, who was a former prosecutor herself, and even Joe Biden, a moderate Democrat. But then you have Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, maybe to the further to the left. But they all seem to have moved to this point where they're saying, there's too many laws on the books. There's too much these mandatory minimums, which I agree have devastated communities, especially in the area of drugs. But I think nobody's really talking about an issue that I think is really significant. And I see this in court when I go to court, is that I think if the average American understood that if the federal prosecutor could be only 3 years out of law school, has more power than a federal judge. I'm really in favor of giving judges more discretion over sentencing instead of tying their hands and having more power in terms of even being able to dismiss indictments. You can see that the government can put so many charges on a person that they're almost forced to just plead to something.
Paul, it's interesting. I don't know.
And that could be a topic for a whole nother show.
Yeah, I know. I don't know where I saw the statistic recently, but I know it to be true, and I don't even know the number. But America incarcerates more people than any country in the world.
Yeah, that's crazy.
There's an issue about, and they've even got a term for it now, called mass incarceration. There has to be a reason for that.
Yeah.
Is it that Americans are committing more crimes than people in Italy or Australia?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah.
So you are probably right. Maybe, hopefully there is a growing trend to, even if people have violated something against society, that there is another way to resolve it than just throwing them in jail.
I agree.
So I believe that you're right. Politically speaking, mass incarceration is an issue. The fact that maybe there are too many laws that are on the books that are on the issue. The racial disparity is definitely an issue in terms of people who are targeted by law enforcement, you know, and police conduct sometimes. The police are wonderful people. I'm not here to disparage the police, but statistics don't lie.
That's right, yeah. No, there's a balance, and there's definitely, I'm glad this debate is occurring in America. It's really long overdue.
Yes.
Michael, this has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much. I'm definitely going to have you back because there's so much more we could cover. But thank you for coming on today's podcast. Really been an honor.
I'll be happy to come back. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Michael. Well, folks, that's another wrap for today. Paul Padda Podcast. Tune in until next time. And until then, be cool, be strong. Thank you.
It's not about the